Hi, everyone. Welcome to Career Lab. We are going to have a great session today about interviewing. Watch your mentors interview each other, both a job fit and a technical. First, I want to do a quick check with our calendar just to make sure everybody's on pace. So let me share my screen. Come on. There it is. And I want to apologize. You might hear some whining from my dog. So can you see our repo? Is it up in the right place? Okay, perfect. And without,
With that
before we go any
beautiful
further,
icon.
check this out.
Yeah,
So
love it.
I decided to take the rocket on because it just fits on so many levels for launching, your career, launching the next phase of your life. I loved it, and it's cute and retro. And so my wife surprised me by making it match our Collab Lab color. So I just love it so very much. You're going to see it everywhere now. Okay, so we're officially at the end of week one. Hopefully you were able to get everything done for LinkedIn and all that set up for telling your story. If not, if you still need a couple of days, if you haven't been able to make it work with meeting your mentor, that's fine if it takes a little bit longer. But that's where we're at after our first week. I apologize that I lost the recording for the Q&A with the recruiter because Yosha was amazing. But I did find some older ones that you can look at because we've done this a few times. And I'm going to be really careful today and not delete this one because I think that's what happened. Anyway, we're starting week 2. You've gotten somebody's attention and now you've got the interview. What do you do next? So this is us here today. So watch us do mock interviews for you. But the first 2 things you want to look at is what to ask your interviewers, how to rock the technical interviewer. These are both async sessions, so it's just materials to read. And then I pushed this to tomorrow. Though, if you feel like starting it today, that's fine. If you've already started it, that's fine too. And that's the assignment for your mock technical. So if you look here, there's a link to the repo. And there's a really fantastic README that's going to walk you through everything you need to do, much like you would get in a real interview tech assignment. You're going to clone the repo. You've got some local setup info, instructions on how to do that, instructions and information about the API that you're going to be using and some examples, and also acceptance criteria, because that's going to be the most important thing to make sure you're meeting the requirements. So take a look at that if you haven't already. Get started when you feel comfortable. Let me back up. So that's what launches this week. Then in the next, do all that stuff for the next couple of days, and then make sure, if you haven't done it already, reach out to your pair partner, who's another Collabby, or 2. I think I have one group of 3 this time around, where you're going to do some practice, just running through the questions and practicing your answers and seeing what feels right, what you want to beef up. And then make sure that you make a date with your mentor for your job fit interview. So your partner is here. If you haven't reached out to them already, get on their calendar for the middle end of next week. And then the same thing with technical. Then we have a bonus session, navigating finances during this career change. That's going to be Wednesday night. And then, well, I guess night for some people, early morning if you come to this one, Raj, because it's late Eastern. And then we'll have our graduation. So in just over a week, you'll have finished all of your Collab Lab stuff and your Career Lab stuff and be ready to go. So if you have any questions, if you have anything that you need, definitely put them in the chat. Reach out to me at any point. We're here to help. Let's see. Another rocket. Oh, we're going to have to figure out how to get that rocket in Zoom, huh? Can you do custom emojis in Zoom?
I
I've
don't
added all the
think
emojis.
so.
I guess we shouldn't ask for too much. Okay, we should have flipped a coin before our session started, but does anyone have preference on job fit interview or technical interview first?
A lot of times in the actual interviewing process, job fit comes first. So, for people who haven't been through a tech interview slate before, usually what happens is, you make contact with a recruiter. They do a quick, maybe 30-minute kind of thing to kind of gauge from their perspective whether you're a good fit for the job, and then they hand you to the hiring manager for the role. And or a hiring manager for similar roles at the company. And you do a job fit, and then based on that, after that person uses their judgment to decide whether to pass you on to the technical. So I would, we could probably mimic the order if that's okay
Sounds
with
good.
everybody.
Sounds perfect. Okay, that means you and I are up.
Oh yeah, it does.
So Andrew is going to be the interviewer, and I'm going to be the interviewee. I'm going to try and focus more on my experience from Collab Lab. Some new stuff might trickle in, but I'm going to try and put myself in your shoes as I was a year ago.
Perfect. All right. Should we get started?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Right. Hi, Shelly. It's really great to get a chance to talk to you. I'm Andrew. I'm an engineering manager at Zapier, and we're
Hi,
talking
Andrew.
about role on the app improvements team. So, I'll leave some time at the end for you to ask me questions and that kind of thing. I'd love to start off with, I saw from your LinkedIn, your resume and things that you were a science teacher for a long time. I'd love to know sort of how you got into web development, like what drew you towards this as a career.
Sure. Yeah, it's a fun story. I fell in love with chemistry accidentally and realized that the quality of a teacher just mattered more than anything else, because I didn't even think that I could do science somehow. And I fell in love with chemistry and realized I needed to teach it. So that was my first path. I don't want to sound too Debbie Downer, but my my fantasy and all of my positive thinking about what teaching could be, um, bumped up against reality. Let's put it that way. So I spent a lot of years. I loved it. I love the kids. I love the content, but there was a level of bureaucracy that was kind of extraordinary. So it made teaching hard. And over the years, I became less enchanted with it, I guess, is the best way to put it. I'd always been the tech person on any school I went to. If we got new tech, I was the person that learned it the fastest or tried it out. So it was always kind of in the back of my head. I took a couple of computer programming classes in college, so it wasn't completely new to me. And so this shift started happening where, okay, what do I do next? What am I going to do if I'm not teaching? Well, COVID happened and decided for me really, really fast when everything shut down. So I learned how to teach remotely on a dime. It was kind of, we went home on a Thursday before a holiday, and that Friday they decided that we were going to shut down for a month and see what happens. And that turned into the rest of the school year. And so learning how to use Zoom, learning how to use online tools for kids and stuff like that. One of the things I realized is a lot of them stunk. A lot of them were not good. And that just started to bubble a lot of creativity. And I decided when we went back into the classroom that I was not ready to teach in person, especially in Georgia, where we did not have a lot of precautions in place or any. And so I took a leave of absence. And while I did that, I took, I don't know if it was Udemy or 2U or edX, but I took some Python class just to keep my brains going. I'm a nerd, I'm a puzzler. And so I thought that would be fun. And I started getting all sorts of ads for boot camps. And I'm like, this seems like something I can do. And I was excited about it. And so I signed up for boot camp and
Nice.
no looking back.
That's great. Yeah, there's some parallels there with my own path too. Like I was actually in education, I was in higher ed administration, and was always the most technical person in my office. Is where I worked, and was kind of drawn to web development eventually. And yeah, so that's great. It's not great that the pandemic happened and like all that kind of stuff, but it sounds like it worked out well for you, right? So
yeah, I think the best thing that came out of the pandemic was just the amazing stuff that happens remotely now. Like,
yeah,
the internet's been everything for years, but the way we adapted to it so fast, and community stuff and learning and everything you can do online now is really remarkable.
We're here we are doing this interview.
Doing it right now.
Right?
Yep.
So, So I saw too that you have been working for a few months. So congrats on getting that first job. It's really tough to break in and all that.
Thank you.
What are you looking for in your next opportunity? What's kind of your ideal situation?
Um, my number one thing is people. Um, and I don't just mean liking the people I work with. I'm a communicator. I'm a teacher. I'm
Hmm.
also a learner. Having to switch gears completely from being the expert in something to being a novice at something has just been. It's going to sound weird. Really done exciting things for my brain. I
Hmm.
love learning, and I love learning with people and from people. I chose my boot camp because it was remote, but it was live classes, and the structure was, do a little lesson, go into breakout room with a few people and practice. And I found that I love that way of working and learning. And so it's really important for me that I be in a place where pair programming is not unheard of,
Hmm.
where we see each other a lot, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever, and also on Slack. So communication, and just that kind of culture. I don't think I was ever meant to work in a basement all by myself, and never talk
Hmm.
to anyone. So while I'm coding, there has to be that community, I guess. So that's the most important thing. Second thing is I want to learn tech. I want to learn more. I've been
Hmm.
having so much fun learning React. And then right now I'm just on my own playing around with Next,
Hmm.
because I bumped into a tutorial and it's so much fun. So I want to learn. I want to do stuff.
Hmm. That's great. Yeah, that pattern of do a lesson, go to a breakout room, and work with people. That's not unlike what we do on this team. So I'm as a manager, I reinforce pair programming and as much as possible. It doesn't always work out, but try to have the whole team working on a single problem at the same time. So it's very common for us to talk through, like we'll do backlog refinement, sprint planning, those kinds of activities, and figure out what needs to be done and what the priority order is. And then the team, the first thing they do is see if can we all kind of solve this top priority problem together. So there's a lot of pair programming that goes on, mob programming. Um, Sometimes it's coordination, then you go off and do pieces of it and then come back and coordinate. So it's kind of this kind of pattern, but
So it sounds
yeah,
like a
it's
perfect balance. Yeah.
yeah. But that's really intentional because I think that together a group like they're gonna solve the problem. They're gonna have a better solution faster if they do it that way. So um, excellent. So in terms of maybe talked about this a little bit, but in terms of a team, what are you looking for? What's kind of the ideal kind of people to have around you, and is there anything that would make it difficult for you to work on a particular team? I guess if you're locked in the basement and they're sliding pizza under the door, it's not
Yeah,
going to work
that's
for you.
probably the one that would make it difficult if people weren't communicating in that way. If every time I sent a message to someone it was 6 hours before. I mean, I've worked
Yeah.
with people in other time zones. That's fine. That's not a problem. But I just mean if everyone I was working with was more of a lone wolf type
Hmm.
personality, I don't think I would do really well with that.
Hmm.
Um, I've gotten much more independent as far as, you know, figuring out when I'm stuck. That was actually a big hurdle for me because I'm used to being an expert. So as a learner, just spending way too many hours trying to figure out something simple, and I've gotten a lot better at that.
Hmm.
But once I've gotten to the point where I know I need to ask for help, you know, where is that help? And
Hmm.
who do I go to? Is that person cool with spending 5 or 10 minutes? Not all day. I've gotten
Hmm.
really good at getting a little bit of information and running with it. But having that give and take is important to me. So I think if the team didn't work like a team,
Hmm.
that would be my biggest challenge.
Right. Okay. That makes a ton of sense. Um, Maybe tell me about some work that you've done that you're particularly proud of.
Mm, that would have to be my most recent project. You probably saw it on LinkedIn, but I did an apprenticeship with the Collab Lab. That is a 2-month program, run completely by volunteer mentors, and coordinators, where it's supposed to add to what everyone's learned in a boot camp, right?
Hmm.
But it does things where instead of just worrying about the tech, it's how do you work on a team? How do you use agile methodologies and those steps of sprints and having retros and that kind of feedback. And so because that's one thing that you don't get in a boot camp.
Hmm.
And so we built the shopping list, and it is a project that got set up just like you would get from a client or in a real world situation where their issues are already set up. There's acceptance criteria for everything, and we would meet. We would divvy up the work in pairs, and then we would work for a week on that one task, and then continue. And so we built the shopping list, which it feels unique. It doesn't feel like a homework assignment because
Hmm.
it feels like we got to put our own spin on everything. And we struggled with stuff because we were all the developers were newbies, and then there were mentors that we met with once a week that would help us out, or twice a week if we
Hmm.
needed more. And we had to make decisions and figure stuff out on our own. Uh, my the big decision I had to make, or I was the one, I guess, who made it, was when we first started. It's a React project, and React Router had just updated like the month
Hmm.
before we started this, and it didn't work well with everything we had before. And there was no material out there because it had just updated. So there weren't 40,000 YouTube videos. And so we had to make a decision if we were going to use an older version that would be
Hmm.
easier, or if we wanted to use the updated version, which would probably pay off to learn, but would obviously have this challenge of, are there going to be bugs, inherent along the way that we don't know about? And we
Hmm.
decided to do it that way. And it was challenging. It
Hmm.
was definitely challenging. But I got to learn something new. So it wasn't a waste of time. It just did take a little bit more time to figure out how to do that. And
Hmm.
so I'm just really proud because it feels real. Like and it's still out there. You can still use it
Hmm.
if you need a shopping list.
Yeah, nice. If you had to go back, would you make the same decision about which version of React Router to use?
I think I would because it's a small-ish standalone app.
Hmm.
I've worked on bigger things since then, and I would have to say probably not because the spread on that could be ridiculous. So I
Hmm.
wouldn't make that decision by myself. That would have to be a whole team thing, the communication to make sure that what might I break that I don't know about.
Hmm.
Since this was our own little self-contained app, we had complete control over it.
Hmm.
So if I was doing something similar to that, I would feel safe trying the new thing because in a year it won't be the new thing anymore. So don't want to
Yeah.
be have too old a stuff in there.
So it's always interesting to hear how people make decisions about technologies, like choosing which technologies to use. So in this case, it's the same package, but it's a different version. Like and so what I hear is one thing is sort of the blast radius of this thing on a bigger project is one of the considerations. Are there any other considerations that might sway you one way or the other? Anything that you would kind of
I
take into
mean,
account?
always the biggest consideration is like efficiency and how well it works. And to be honest, I am not really good at that yet. I try and do research to find out and do
Hmm.
my own testing, but I don't have a huge body of knowledge in my head to know you know what's really going to slow everything down, what's more efficient, what's the best practice.
Hmm.
That's what I'm still learning. So I think that would definitely be an issue
Hmm.
on choice. But that's why I would want to be with a team of people so I could try my
Hmm.
approach and then go, hey, can you take a look at this? Would you do it differently? You know,
Hmm.
um, peer review or higher than peer review to
Yeah,
try and
right,
get
right.
that knowledge.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I see we're kind of coming up on time, so I wanted to, and I said I'd give you a chance to ask me some questions. So, what do you got? Happy to be
Um,
as transparent as I can.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. This is a remote role, and I know
Hmm.
that Zapier was remote before we all had to be remote,
Hmm.
which is great. I've said over and over that like people and community and stuff is really important to me. What does that look like? Like what's a day in your life, or
Mhm.
just what does that look like? How are you dealing with remote, still feeling like people are together?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, we live in Slack, so we have a very strong Slack culture. The company is around 650 employees, and there are thousands of Slack channels. So, what the approach that we tend to take is that we try to have channels that are pretty narrowly focused on topics, but some of those are fun topics too. So, if you search like Fun Dash as a channel name, you're going to see a list of, I don't know, 300 or 400 fun channels, like fun
Nice.
donkeys and fun, like all kinds of things that people are interested in. There's somebody who has donkeys anyway. So, um, so we are remote, been remote since the very beginning, since the founders hired their first employee, and I think do it really well. It's one thing that we kind of do. I mean, we do things in Slack and kind of in our meetings to bring some humanity into it and bring some warmth and all that kind of stuff. Lots of gifts and emoji and all that stuff. We also augment that with twice a year, get the whole company together retreats. So
Cool.
there was a while there during the pandemic where we couldn't do that, but I was lucky enough to go to three of those before that happened, and then we've had a couple since things have started to kind of open back up, and those are those are great. They're a change of pace. You get to know people in a different way, hanging out with them for a week, in Austin or San Diego or wherever we end up.
Awesome. That's really cool. Um, I know we are running out of time. What's your
Yeah.
favorite thing about working there?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the people. It's
Mhm.
100% the people. Not 100%. I mean, the top thing is the people. It's not only the people. There are other good
Mhm.
things about it, but they pay me as an example. But no, the
That is good.
people. Zapier tends to attract people that are optimistic and action oriented, and it kind of like there's a vibe around just being supportive and sharing information, and it's a very natural kind of mentorship type culture and things. So very growth oriented. So that's probably that tends to attract a certain kind of person. And yeah, I have so many good friends, people that I count as friends who started off as coworkers there. So
That's
yeah, it's probably the
that's
best thing.
awesome. I really
Hmm.
appreciate that. Yeah. Um, Growth oriented and learning and mentorship being built in
Hmm.
is so important to me because it means there's a culture of learning and learning
Hmm.
together. And I will always be a teacher. So that's always going to be
Hmm.
something I'm looking for. Thank you so
Yeah, yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Sorry we don't have more time to talk, but we'll cut it there.
Same.
um, so nice job. I'd be interested to hear from y'all, like what you thought of Shelley's how she handled herself with those answers.
Marvelous lead performance. Where are your flowers?
I actually got a little nervous. That was weird. I haven't done that in a
Uh-huh.
while, but that's good
Yeah.
because I have to start doing it again.
Hmm. Any feedback for Shelley? Could you relate to the things she was
I really
saying?
liked the
Hmm.
stories
Yeah.
you told in response to Andrew's questions. I think I have a bit of a lag. Sorry, Andrew. I just want to say I liked the responses you gave to Andrew's questions. I thought that you sort of zeroed in on some of the things you wanted to tell really well to kind of show Andrew who you are. Um, I don't know. You did a great job. I no notes. Good stuff.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, I
thought it
was
was
Yeah, I
impressed with
def
her.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
Amanda, go
What was
ahead.
that?
I was gonna say I
Yeah.
thought it was good that you did admit that you were not comfortable doing some stuff or doing things, which I'm always never sure if it's okay to say things like that. I always struggle with
Hmm.
the I'm perfect. There's anything that you need. So I thought it was good that you did admit that at times.
There is
That's a
a
high.
there's a power or strength in owning what you're not great at,
Hmm.
and it ends up not sounding like a weakness because you've recognized it, and what are you going to do with that, or what did you do with that? Like how are you going to
Hmm.
use that to do better next time? That's pretty powerful stuff, and I don't know if that's come from age, and honestly, and this is probably something I would say in an interview, of being a novice again has taught me what that's like. And you know, it's both been an ego boost and an ego leveler. I really know what I can offer now. So yeah, own the things you aren't great at and what you're doing about fixing them. I think that's good stuff.
Yeah, 100%. As a hiring manager, it's really helpful for me to know, those things because, I need to fit you onto a team that has their own strengths and weaknesses. And so, if there is something you're kind of owning as something you're not that good at, be clear about, am I working to improve it? Like I know I can get better at this and I'm working on it, or is it something I've tried to get better at? It's not really going well, so I need certain other people on the team that can kind of fill in that gap. And that's, as our hiring manager, it's really helpful to know those things. Cool.
I also want to say, Andrew, you just said what I was going to say anyway, so thank you for saying it better than I would have. But also, when you can say in an interview that you don't know something very well, that also shows your interviewer that you understand the subject matter enough to know what your boundaries are, which is a sign of knowledge. Because when you're very, very new or very, very unsure, you don't even know what you don't know. But to say that you don't know something is also an indicator of what you do actually know.
Yep, it's a really good point.
And it shows that you're honest.
Yeah.
That you're not going to hide that you didn't know how to do something until you get caught,
And self-aware too. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we should probably hand it over to EJ and Raj.
Okay. Time
But
for
nice
our
job,
technical
Shelley.
team.
Well done.
Okay, you both ready? I'm just going to mute and let you go for it.
So just to be clear, because I know that this is written differently in the repo, that's the word I was looking for. Raj will be interviewing me. We decided to do it that way today. So surprise for everyone, in case you were expecting the way around. In that case, let's go. Take away, Raj.
Hi, Jay. Congratulations on getting through the culture fit round, and I hope you are doing good. Since this is a technical round, we are going to go through some technical questions, and then we are going to go through the takeaway home assignment that you have done so far. So yeah, let's just start with some technical question. So, what do you know about DOM model and what is a box model in CSS? And what's the difference between the two?
Okay, yeah. The DOM is a representation in the computer's memory of what the HTML looks like on the page, sort of. It's the idea that everything on the page is an object that has its own properties, has things you can look up, things you can change, you can query it, you can walk it like a tree if you want to. The CSS box model really only shares the word model with the DOM. The box model sort of says that everything on the page is a square, and you can fake change the shape of the square by doing something with the border, but really the box model just says how much space the thing on the page takes up and what it looks like.
What do you understand by doc type that we declare in the beginning of a HTML file? What it is, what does it do, and why it is required? And what if we don't put it there?
That's a great question. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's a great question. As far as I understand now, the doc type is actually a relic of history because browsers have kind of agreed on how to read HTML documents. But back in the before times, when Internet Explorer decided to do its own things, we had to explicitly declare what the doc type was so that the browser wouldn't read it as XML, which actually might still happen. So I would need to go and confirm that. That's a good question.
So what will happen if we don't put it there? Does the web page work or it will not work?
It should still work, but this is where I actually don't know the complete answer. I think these days the browser will make a guess as to what kind of document you have, and then if you and then you kind of have to deal with that guess. And I think the default guess by now is that it would guess that you got HTML.
Got it. Yeah, sure. Why not? So there is something called function, regular function. Then there is something the that ES6 introduced, which is called fat arrow function. What is the difference between two? Why do we use each of those type of function, and when are those required?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a requirement for one function or the other unless you're doing some really weird stuff with this keyword within the function, which is bound differently inside of an arrow function. But otherwise, a lot of the time we're using ES6 arrow functions as a matter of style, because there's fun things you can do with ES6 arrow functions to make them shorter. You can do an implied return or implicit return with an ES6 arrow function, so you can cut down on all those pesky return keywords if you're trying to min-max your application size, for one example. But then on the other hand, the function keyword functions are really explicit about what they are. They look like functions. They have been in JavaScript since the dawn of time, so it's kind of obvious to your team that that's what they are. So I could see ES6 functions being confusing, or the fact that there are two different syntaxes being confusing if you're working on a team of people who are early career. And I would make choices to try to write code that would be readable by everyone as like number one priority.
Got it. Yeah, great approach. So there is something known as anonymous function in JavaScript. So have you heard about it, or how does it fit in the categories of functions that we have discussed right now?
Yeah, anonymous function is just a function that doesn't have a name, which happens in a few different cases. You can't, at the top level of your code, just write a function and have it run in normal circumstances, but you could pass a callback function without giving it a name in argument. Like, let's say you've got a function that takes a bit of data and then runs a callback function on it. You could make that function anonymous, unnamed. But otherwise, that's the key thing, is you don't have a name that you can reference later if you want to for any reason.
So is it possible to convert the ES6 fat arrow function to an anonymous function? Is it possible to use it that way?
Yes, I do that often when I am writing event handlers in JavaScript. You can just pass a little function in and have it do whatever task you need to do.
Got it. So there are different types of variable that we can create, and there are different keywords which we can use to create variables in JavaScript. So what's the difference between var and let in JavaScript?
Excuse me. Yeah, var declarations are the Wild West. You can have them. They get hoisted to the top of the function. You can reassign them. You can do all these things. Whereas with let, they are scoped to the block in which they're declared. So if you're in an if statement, you declare a let, you will only be able to use that let variable within that if statement. Whereas if you do a var inside an if statement, you have the ability to, if you want to hoist that up there, and it can be a little bit confusing. So we kind of have migrated away from vars into let and const these days.
Okay. So does each of the keywords var and let behave in the same way if we use a variable without declaring it first?
Ooh, I haven't done that in a while. I actually don't know what will happen off the top of my head. I try to be so good about declaring all my variables that I don't actually know for sure what'll happen. I would love to go and test that after we're done talking here.
Yeah, definitely. It was just a curious question out of my mind. It's not required at all. So we have two keywords, var and let. Is there some kind of performance difference between the two, or memory difference?
To my knowledge, no. Var and let both tell the machine to make a pointer going somewhere to this memory that we're assigning to a certain thing. I would imagine that there's no difference, although I guess early on there could have been if engines weren't optimized to know what that keyword did, but these days probably not. And it's not one of the things I would focus on if I was trying to make my app run faster.
Okay, so we all know that we have to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for our front-end application. Then there is something called JSX in React application. So what's the difference between these two?
HTML is the classic way we describe markup for pages. It was designed and released decades ago now. JSX looks like HTML, but it has some enhancements, and it's meant to be run in a JavaScript environment rather than just directly in the browser. JSX is a domain-specific language that allows you to sort of express your pages and how they look, and then compile that down to code the machine understands. And you can put CSS in it. You can put JavaScript syntax in it in certain places, depending on how you're writing your code. But JSX is basically like a developer experience improvement for writing front-end applications.
So does JSX have any performance, upgrade over native HTML, CSS, and JavaScript?
JSX itself doesn't really have any performance implications because it comes down to what your tools will turn the JSX into. And so in that sense, there probably are performance implications because you're going to be creating, a bunch of JavaScript code. Whereas if you had just written HTML and just put that in a file and served it to the browser, served it to the user, you'd have something that's much easier for the computer to do math on. JavaScript is much more expensive for the machine to do math on than anything else. So if you are writing an entire front end in JSX as opposed to HTML, it's going to be much more complex and harder to render than the HTML version would be.
Great answer. You are doing great. So what do you understand by a stateless component and a stateful component in React?
React components don't have to have a state. They don't have to do anything interesting or change things if they don't want to. You can just kind of render stuff if that's kind of the goal of your component. And stateful components are the ones that have state in them that manage something that change over time in response to user interaction or in response to database changes and things like that.
Okay, so is it possible to for a component to get its value manipulated or modified, but it doesn't render it on the front end?
Do you mean like, is it possible to do something in the component that like change something inside of it, but not show it to the user or not make it re-render?
So is it possible for a React component to change its value by a code and it doesn't re-render on the front end, or it doesn't show any kind of changes even though the value has been changed?
Yeah. If I understand what you're asking correctly, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that can happen if you have something that you track inside your component, but it isn't a prop or a state. And so if you have something like a random variable that you declare inside the component and you change it during the work you're doing, that won't tell React that you need to redraw the component and do anything for the user. It'll just kind of happen and get thrown away.
So is it related to stateless or stateful component in some way?
Not necessarily, because you can do something like that in your code regardless of whether you got a stateful or stateless component. It's something you want to be careful to avoid unless you know exactly what you're doing, because you typically want to have changes in your component be shown to the user and to re-render something.
Okay, so you have done a great job. Let's move to the takeaway home assignment that you have worked on over the week. Can you just share your screen or
sure
show some screenshot?
Yeah. Please let me know if this is too crunchy looking, because my computer has not been happy this morning. And if it is, we will work around it. But I'm going to share my browser window. Do we see a big browser window going on here?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, just so we can make sure we can all read it. And so I have here my response to take-home assignment, which is to build an app that looks for some art in the Chicago Institute of the Arts. And I'm going to look for cats, because who doesn't do that when they're searching for something? I hit enter, and it took a few seconds because my computer's a little tired this morning. And now I've got a list of results, and I can pick one of them. and it shows this this full screen view that shows the cat illustration. It has the title, it has the artist's name, and it has the description that the API provided. I meant that a little bonus because usually when you're going to a museum, you can kind of see a description or a flavor text about the piece you're looking at. And I like seeing that kind of stuff. And then finally, if I click back, I get back to the original list of results, and I can choose to keep looking around if I want to. Did you have any questions about any of this? I'd be happy to explain anything or show some code.
Yeah, definitely. Like, so you have implemented image feature and
sorry, what was your question?
So let me rephrase it. So have you, done all of the tasks for the home assignment?
Yeah. When we talked earlier, I actually thought I wouldn't have time to finish, but it turns out I did. So I'm very glad about that. And I did a little bit of the bonus with the description on the bottom. Like I said, I picked a different one, but same thing that shows the description at the bottom.
So how is this search functionality working, and how you are getting the result, and then how you are getting these links, and when you click on these links, how you are getting those images and codes? Can you like walk us through the whole workflow and then dig deeper into the code?
Yeah, I'll answer just out loud just to make sure that we've got the ideas down, and then I'll switch to sharing my code window because I realized I just shared my browser, so I have to unshare and reshare, and that's a hassle with Zoom. I wish you could just add on to the share rather than having to undo it. So basically, what I'm doing is I've got I fetch the data as soon as the page loads, or sorry, as soon as the user makes a request. But then when the user picks something, I conditionally change what gets shown here in the app. So we're not using React Router because that to me was a bit complex for what we had going on. And I also saw that in the notes for the assignment, you explicitly asked us not to do that to save time, because the goal was to kind of just do something to prove an MVP here. But basically, when the user clicks on something, the app says, okay, the user has selected something. I'm going to change the conditions of what I render, and I'm going to render this full screen sort of look at the piece instead. And then with that, I'm going to stall for time while I change what I'm sharing so we can see my entire, or we can see my code at least. Any questions about anything I just said while I'm trying to make the computer be nice to me?
No, it's all good. You are doing good. Great so far.
Okay. Great. So here's the repo. Here's my full screen with the repo in it. And I'll put this on one side and that on the other. Here we have. Let me go through this real quick. Let's go to the app page. So, excuse me. I've got this app component, which is where most of the fun stuff happens. It renders this app div. It renders the components I import, which I'll go over in a second. I've got handlers for the search submit. I've got a handler for the button click and for clicking on the individual artworks. But yeah, basically I've got all these functions, and they kind of get passed into the components that render the individual pieces of the project. I've got a search page specifically, and I've got an image details page. The search page takes the data from the app component and renders a list of LIs and shows the names of the art pieces in there. And then if we go back to the other, if we go back to app, we'll see that I've got also this details page, which is the thing that shows the full screen artwork. That is, so the details page is this thing, and the search page is this thing, this list of results. And the details page is this thing I've built where it just shows the full image of the component, and it also tries to size it nicely. I spent some time doing that because I wanted it to be not too big, not too small, the Goldilocks of images, if you will. I think that's it as far as the overview. Did you have any specific questions?
Like, yeah, so you showed us how is the search working and you are getting images and data. So are we getting the data from some remote servers and you are making queries to that particular server, or is the data saved somewhere in your local project?
Oh yeah, yeah. I should have probably started with that. Yeah, we make requests to the Chicago Institute of the Arts API, which happens. We've got this search artworks function that we inherited from the starter, and that goes and gets the data from this URL down here, which we kind of append parameters to. And from there, once that's done, it takes that request and makes a fetch request and returns the data that I then manipulate in the app component. Sorry, I should have said that first. Thank you for asking.
Okay. So can you just go through your file structure of the whole project, how you have modified it from the boilerplate we gave you?
Yeah, I don't think I added too much. My brain is a sieve, so I could have done some more stuff that I'm thinking of right now. But I've got this concept of components and pages, which I kind of inherited from my time at the Collab lab, where they gave us a repo that had some sections within the file structure. And within that, I've got a CSS file for each page, and I've got the JSX file for each page. And this utils folder was already here, but I really liked the sort of structure that was implied here, and I liked the idea of keeping the concept of a component and a page separate, because that helps me to know what I'm looking for, whether it's like a full big thing that renders other things, or it's an individual thing that has one job.
Okay, good. So can you just go through the this project directory and just explain like what different directories are used for and what are different types of files are present in the root of the project and why they are necessary? Just an overview, not in an in-depth discussion.
Yeah. So like I said, we have JSX files for rendering the UI. We have CSS files for styling, and we have I don't think anything else is too exciting. There's some configs for like linting. We have some plain JS files for just the API stuff, because there was no need for JSX in there. And then we've got some tests, which I didn't have time to really to improve. But if I had more time, I would love to test this thing properly to make it more robust. Was there anything else you wanted me to talk about?
I noticed
think
that there is a
Oh,
file.
there you go.
Yeah. So I noticed that there is a file in the root of the project called index.html. So why is it there? What's the use of it when we are having app.jsx in our project and index.jsx as well?
Yeah, this I think actually came from the starter itself. I didn't touch this. It was something that was part of the project that was given, and I believe that that's just kind of a convention of the tool that this project uses in development, which is called Beat, to render the page. And then the other index page is, where did that even go? My brain is a sieve. Okay, oh, there it is. Aha. This just kind of renders the app. This is the thing that you do in React, where you have to declare where the app goes, where in the document it goes, and then you render it with React, and it shows to the user.
Okay, got it. So there is some file inside the directory utils api.js. Can you just open it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you just like go through this from a high level perspective?
Sure. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I've got this search artworks function, which does the stuff to get a URL. It does some stuff to make a fetch request. And I built this little function just to make it easier to know what's getting put into the URL to make it easier to read, because I didn't want to have a long, ugly string that was hard to look at, hard to change. So I built this string with some JavaScript instead. And then from there, we export this to make the fetch request in app.js, and then it gets called. And then also I've got this thing where I get the image URL in the same way, just to make it nice and clean. And that gets called in, I believe in image details page is where I call it, where I get yes, I call this to get the image source, rather than trying to have an ugly URL that's hard to read. I wanted to be able to go somewhere where I knew that that was what it was doing, and it was easy for me to remember that was the purpose of the code.
So there is something called JSON.stringify in your API.js. So why is it there? Is it necessary?
I actually, yes, it's necessary. I almost said that it might not be, but it's necessary because I've got this object here, and you can't really put an object into a string, so you need to turn it back into a string in order to make a URL that works. If I were to take this part of the code out, there would be an error, and my computer would be very upset with me. So yeah, that's necessary. And yeah, like I said, all it does is turn this object structure into a string that kind of looks like the object instead. And it results in a valid URL in the case of all this work that's being done on line 67.
Okay. So there is something called encode URI component. So why is it there? What does it do? And what if we removed it and use the params directly into the API?
Yeah, encode URI component sort of follows up on the work of JSON stringify by taking all of the characters that a URL wouldn't like and taking them out or changing them to something else so that you can make a valid URL. If I didn't do that, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to make a request at all.
Yeah. Thanks for taking your time, EJ, out of your schedule, and you will be hearing from us within a week. And yeah, it was great talking with you. Looking to meet you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. And scene.
Nice work.
Thanks.
That was awesome. So EJ, just as a fellow interviewee, did you feel a little nervous? Does it kind of trigger some feelings?
Yeah, I think it always does, because there's this, like, I liken interviews like this to auditioning, which I used to do for theater all the time, and it's just like it's such a weird thing to have in front of like a computer screen, because to me it's not at all like what you'd be doing for work. Like, at least with theater it makes sense because that it mirrors like what you do professionally to do your job. But with working on software, you are never really in a position authentically while doing your work that you're doing the things you're doing in an interview. So it's always a weird feeling.
So anybody have questions?
Any questions, feedback, any notes on my performance for next time, directors?
Actually,
I do have a couple things.
I saw something go off in
Andrew.
the chat. Oh, there we go.
Oh, I'll turn the chat off. The cat gif, or cat emoji. So EJ, the things I really liked about what you did, like you were clear when you didn't know something, which is really helpful. And then something that I like even more is that you expressed curiosity about finding out what the actual answer was, which, because we as software people are running into things we don't know all the time. And the difference between people who continue to learn and grow and people who maybe stagnate or whatever is that curiosity. So that was really fun to hear. And then the other thing was when the question or the concept being asked about wasn't clear, you ask clarifying questions. And then that's, sometimes it's easy to kind of be in this interview setting and think I have to know it the first time they say the thing, or it shows that I'm some kind of fraud or something. But you were very, very easy with just like asking like, oh, could you say it another way? Or, I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that. So I thought that was really positive as well.
Yeah,
One
thank
thing
you.
you did that I loved, and I try to do it too, and it actually might be nice to get some feedback from Andrew if it really is as good as I think. You added that extra line at the bottom and justified it. That little moment communicates so much because it means that you're not just an automaton going through the steps, that you can do a little bit more, and why you do. I mean, it's just a few lines of speech. You communicated all of that, and that's something that I learned in this particular session from my career lab. So I did it, and I do it in interviews as well. Is it a good thing, or is there going to be somebody out there that thinks, oh wow, the acceptance criteria, you added stuff, clients hate that? I mean, or is it definitely a good thing to do to show that you can do more and that you've
I have
got,
thoughts, but I want Andrew to go first.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question because, you know, like here at Collab Lab, like we're very clear, like don't go past the acceptance criteria. But it's really because we're trying to protect your time, right? So I think, you know, when I think back to when I was working at Zapier, you know, there's a similar dynamic, and like, you know, a lot of times you're working in a 2-week sprint and you're trying to get certain things done, certain sort of meet certain product goals during that time. So you don't want people just going off and doing completely different things than what the team has planned. On the other hand, like I mean, a lot of managers at Zapier really like emphasized wanting product engineers, and what we mean by that is you don't just take a list of requirements and make it work the way that it's said in the thing. You're thinking about the user's experience of it, because, and part of the reason for that is that engineering managers, product managers are busy people too, so they're sometimes having to throw these tickets together at the last minute and like give them to the engineers and hoping that they you know, they're not just doing whatever is said, even with all the gaps that may be there, but they're thinking holistically about the application and how the user uses it. So I think you're right. It was a really positive thing to show, EJ, that you were kind of, you know, thinking beyond just the strict requirements of it and trying to think of like what would be a good experience for you.
Yeah, thank you. You said a lot of stuff I was already going to say, so I should just defer to you whenever anyone asks me a question. You'll handle it, my spokesperson. But I want to add, that the sort of caveat I'd add to going beyond the AC of an assignment like this is sort of that, like, these interview prompts are designed for as much equity as is possible within an interview process, and so there's a chance that you can go beyond the scope of a requirement, and they're like, that's nice, but we can't judge you on that. So I did too much in this take home, I think, personally. But actually what happened was I was working on this to see if I could show like what an optimal version of this would be to other mentors, and then I didn't step back far enough in my Git history to the version I wanted to use. And I realized that in real time as I pulled it up, I was like, oh, this is the wrong version of the code. We're gonna go, we're gonna deal with it. But my point is that you could do extra stuff, I think, if there's like a bonus goal defined in the assignment, but I wouldn't worry too much about going too far outside the AC for an assignment, because they are people agonize over the design of these interview processes. So you shouldn't try too hard to show extra stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the other thing I would say is don't do something extra if you haven't completed the expectations, right? Like if you, you know, like in this case, EJ, I'm guessing that the one that you showed took you far more than the 1 hour that we're asking people to spend on it. So, you know, if you don't get through everything in the 1 hour, don't add something on to it. Does that make sense? So.
Yeah. I guess I could see some value in adding something that's relevant to the assignment. If there's something you don't know how to do, but you want to show that you do know stuff, I could see that being a thing. Like if it's sort of like a Hail Mary, because some people do appreciate you showing that you do know how to solve a problem, even if it's not exactly the problem that's in front of you. They value that demonstration as much as that you meeting the AC. But generally, yes, I would agree with Andrew about, you know, try to do the core things first.
And also probably spend a little bit of time thinking about what you would do. If you don't have the time to go further, think about what it is. Because I got that question a lot about, you know, if you had more time, what would you do next? And maybe even volunteering that. Like if I had more time, I would add these things during the demo.
And that's a good way to show that you're engaged.
Yeah,
with the process.
like I said, I meant to have an incomplete version. Sorry. Sorry, Andrew. I was just saying I meant to have an incomplete version of the app, and then I realized as soon as I pulled it up that I hadn't gone to the right thing. So that's called improv, everybody.
What about some people that go above and beyond on styling? Let's say it's for a front end job or something, and you don't have to, but the people that do, does that affect your project standing out at all to other people? Would they hold it against you if you just did the basics and made it like centered or something?
It's a good question. And I think it depends a little bit.
As an interviewer,
it depends maybe on the team and the people, but again, if you get the core functionality working, and then I couldn't stand seeing it just as a white background with black text. There might be people that really appreciate that, if it's especially if it's kind of a design forward company, if you know what I mean. So there's some places, if it's New Relic, they're not going to care. They're like, oh, we prefer no CSS at all or something. But if it's Apple or something, like they're going to appreciate paying attention to some of the details. So
I definitely did that in mine.
But I understand. I just want to be the person who says again that like you want to avoid trying to guess what will make you magical to your interviewers, because they don't have time for all that stuff necessarily. Like they've designed a specific set of criteria for a reason. And I say this as someone who's also been tempted to do more on my take homes, and someone who's been an interviewer on a panel who helps decide who gets hired. We have a rubric, and it can't ever include this thing that you did to surprise us. So it helps us to get a sense of who you are as a developer and things you care about, which can be valuable for deciding what candidates move on to the next stage. But it's not going to improve a material letter grade, to borrow Shelley's world from being a teacher. We can't turn your A into an A+ based on something that isn't in the scope of the project. But if there are bonus things that were scoped out for you, consider doing those for sure if you have more time.
I've never seen anybody do this, but it might be interesting. You show up, you're sharing your screen, and you have your project sort of pulled up at a certain commit that meets the time criteria and things, but you did spend more time on it. And when they ask you that question, like, oh, what would you do if you had more time? It's like, well, as a matter of fact, let me just change this to the very latest commit and show you what I did do.
Let's look behind door number 2.
Yeah. Never seen anybody do that, but if you have the time. The other thing is that these things take a lot of time, and if you're in multiple interview round, like with multiple companies or something, you'd be spending all your time on these take homes. And it's, if you really are excited about a company and like you think you have a good chance at it, maybe it's worth the investment. If it's one of 6 things you're trying to do at the same time, you're just going to burn yourself out if you try to do it. So.
Also, like, the way you have answered all of the question, it just shows that you know the way around how the whole project is working, and it shows that you know what to do if you don't know something, where to look up, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, EJ, really came through. You're very knowledgeable about the front end, so nice job.
Thank you.
This was awesome.
Like, what do you think?
No, go ahead, Raj.
So what do you think about the questions that I have asked in that interview, the technical question and the questions regarding the project as well? So were they according to the constraint, or those were too hard for a junior developer role?
I like them. I would love to hear from someone who doesn't have the curse of knowledge whether they thought they were too hard. I thought you did a great job. I had a lot of fun.
The thing I liked about them was that you were asking questions that seemed simple on the surface, but we're trying to get at, like, do you understand fundamentally how this thing is working? Like, why do we need an index.html if we have an index.js? Like, great question. And someone, it's a kind of a fair question. Like, do we really need that thing? Like, but that you need it if you kind of understand how the browser is actually constructing the whole application. So it's a pretty revealing questions. So I like the questions a lot.
I definitely wouldn't have known how to answer the performance difference between JSX and HTML question. I hadn't thought about it in that sense before, so that was really cool to hear. Oh, yeah, thinking about it, that would take extra processing power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. EJ, you left one little piece on the table with that question, which is that you could have all the JSX, all the most complicated React application you wanted. If you were doing a static site generator, it would have the same performance on the front end, right? So, but yeah,
it comes down to which device is doing all the math.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then there you can talk about the cost at build time versus the cost at runtime and those kinds of concepts. But yeah, there are going to be things that you're asked where it's beyond your level of knowledge. So just go in knowing that, like, kind of be comfortable with that, and like EJ did, say, you know what, I've never encountered that before. I don't really know. I don't have enough context. But as soon as we get off this, I'm going to look it up because I can't stand not knowing. Like that's kind of the ideal way for that to be answered from my perspective.
Well, I'm gonna stop us here because we're a little bit over, but this was really fun, really valuable. I hope you all got something out of it. I hope you're pumped to start looking into all the interview resources we've got for you, and reach out if you need us. And I'll see you next time.
Great job.
Enjoy the rest of your
Thank
weekend.
you very much.
Bye.
Thanks.